Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to be speaking about qualitative data analysis. Now, qualitative data, as we all know, is data that is not based on numbers, not numerical, but based on, you know, things, emotions, human stuff. So, qualitative data analysis involves transforming unstructured raw information because, as we said, we have qualitative data, but in order to make nice analyses on them, we have to turn them into quantitative data because SPSS does not understand it when we say, oh, this guy feels kind of sad. It only wants to see numbers. So, uh, our goal is to transform this unstructured information into a meaningful structure that aligns with the study's aims. So, in this process, the researchers screen, classify, interpret data to reduce complexity, find patterns, and construct meaning. So, if you have a brain, you can probably answer that. So, research approaches. We have two separate approaches, the first one being inductive, the second one being deductive. And the main difference between the both of them is the fact that inductive starts with data, but deductive starts with the theory. So, deductive aims to see if the theory is correct or not. So its nature is confirmatory. Whereas in inductive, you are trying to find something new. You are trying to actually construct this theory. Because inductive means uh, A plus A equals B. So uh, all of the C equals A. Something like that, dude. You're trying to generalize something. But deductive is coming from a generalization to something specific. So you are trying to generate that generalization. You are trying to create that theory. So inductive is flexible, whereas deductive is structured, and deductive tests the theory, as we said, but inductive is generating that theory. So I will not go over the examples. So we have some key analytical processes. The first one of these being grounded theory, developed by Glaser and Strauss. I don't think it will be asked in the exam, but grounded theory aims to generate new concepts and theories directly from data without imposing pre-existing theories. So this is just the inductive approach, but given a fancy new meaning. An abstract theory regarding processes and interactions is constructed based on participants' perspectives. So we are generating a new theory from scratch, as we said before. So we have two separate, processes in our analysis. The first one being conceptualization, the second one being coding. So, conceptualization is basically breaking down collected data into meaningful units and assigning exploratory concepts to reveal underlying patterns. What you are doing is basically creating variables to reveal underlying patterns. Coding is the stage that makes conceptualization concrete by using short labels to break data into manageable units. We usually call these variables, as I said. So, conceptualization is turning the raw information or the theory into something you can work with. Basically, you're molding it into something that's workable. So, we have three separate types of coding, and I believe these are sequential, so one after another, but I may be wrong on that. So the first one is open coding, which identifies key concepts within the data. And it proceeds flexibly based on the researcher's intuition, because we don't know much about these concepts. So we are just starting our research. So we are just coding things as we see them fit, because we just don't know enough about the subject to actually assign concrete values. For example, coding, I feel anxious when I post something and don't get enough likes, into concepts like anxiety, social validation, and fear of judgment. So we call this sentiment analysis, and here is a sentiment, and you are basically saying, okay, this person is feeling anxious. They're seeking social validation, and they have a fear of judgment. So you are giving them these categories or these character traits, these variables. Actually, axial coding or axial coding establishes relationships between categories and subcategories to create a coherent structure. What does this mean? This means if this is causing this, like cause and effect relationships, like identifying social media pressure as a category, low engagement as a cause, and anxiety as a consequence. You see, we had low engagement as a cause, and the effect is anxiety because this person feels anxious when they post something and they don't get enough likes, which is low engagement. See, so we are trying to make connections between these different variables throughout our research. Selective coding identifies a core central category to which all other categories are linked until theoretical saturation is achieved. So, throughout all of these connections, you are aiming to create a big theory, okay? This is what it means. You are selectively coding these into one central idea, like algorithmic visibility anxiety. This is a term we call when people are anxious about getting enough likes or not. More concrete examples could be the superego, ego, id structure, the tripartite mind of Freud, for example, or the social learning theory. We are putting all of these categories one under another and seeing that they all connect somewhere. We assign a meaning to this cluster of information. This is what we call selective coding. Analytic memos are basically their detailed field notes containing observations and interpretations, which serves as a bridge between concrete data and abstract theory, like noting that participants link self-worth to online visibility, indicating a shift from internal to external validation. So you're keeping notes throughout the research process, which you will then use in your research paper or whatever publication that you are going to make. So, how do we actually analyze the data that we have just gathered? We use qualitative analysis strategies because our data is qualitative. So, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. We have 7 different types of analyses. The first one was developed by Max Weber, and it basically creates a theoretical model like a perfect rational consumer, and you contrast it with real data showing people make emotional decisions. So you are trying to see where your theoretical model deviates from reality. So you create like a baseline ideal model and you see the real data. This is sort of the approach we use in research papers, creating a hypothetical world where nothing happens, and you create a H1 where different things happen. So you're trying to see where the discrepancies are by trying to see if you've actually established a change or not, maybe. So the second one is the sequential approach. It's a non-linear process where researchers continually go back and reread data to refine codes. What this essentially means is you know the codes we created here. First of all, we linked this feeling of anxiety to, fear of judgment, maybe. But then we realized that it's actually a fear of worthlessness. So you change this code that you made, this variable you've made, to something else throughout the process. So nothing is actually concrete, nothing is fixed. Your research will be dynamic. You will have to reiterate through everything. So to reiterate, coding data as loneliness, realizing later it is actually fear of exclusion, and revising the codes accordingly. Illustrative method is using specific representative examples, like case studies, to arrive at a general explanation, selecting 3 strong quotes from 100 interviews to demonstrate a broader theme to make the analysis clear and persuasive. Cultural/field analysis investigates cognitive patterns, normal behaviors in society to understand lifestyles within a society. The researcher asks what meanings people share and what is considered normal in a group. So you are going down into the field and checking out what the culture there is like. The 4th one is analytic comparison, which is developed by John Stuart Mill. It derives its meaning by comparing cases using the method of agreement or method of difference. So, for example, if 5 anxious people all use Instagram heavily, social media use is identified as a common cause. This is the example for agreement. But if we look at the example for difference, if person A is anxious and person B is not, and the only difference is online exposure, that variable is highlighted. So you're trying to see which things are different and which things are agreed upon. This is the analytic comparison. So if you see example for agreement and difference, you're going to see analytic. Narrative analysis examines written or oral life experiences, like diaries or films, to understand how events are interpreted, like analyzing how describing a failure as "I learned a lot" versus "I was humiliated" reflects different meaning-making patterns and identities. So you are going to a single person's diary and reading through it to see how they interpreted what you said to them or what happened to them. So you're looking into the personal life of that era or that person. When you think of a movie or like a book, you go back, you watch the movie, you watch the film, and then you get to see the zeitgeist of the time or the climate of the time, the political climate, what was happening, how did people act, what were they thinking, what was outliner, like what is an exception. Negative case analysis examines a deviant or outlier case that does not fit the established model, like in investigating why a single participant feels free while the majority feels pressure, which helps prevent biased conclusions. We want to look at the negative cases as well as the positive cases, because if we ignore the negative cases completely, if we ignore the outliers completely, we will just be looking at the people that agree with us. This is why it prevents bias. So, to reiterate, we have ideal types where an ideal reality is created and then compared to real data. We have sequential approach where we assign codes and then we refine them. We have the illustrative method where we take some examples and try to reach a general explanation from them. We have cultural/field analysis, which goes down into the field and starts to see what is normal, what is not. We have analytic comparison, which looks at method of agreement and method of difference, what's different, what is agreed upon. We have narrative analysis, which looks at personal stuff like diaries or films to learn about the impacts of something. And negative case analysis is looking at the outliers. So we need to, of course, interpret our findings and reach a conclusion. So the interpretation of findings is the most critical stage, requiring an appropriate balance between rich descriptions, direct quotations, and conceptual explanations to avoid unnecessary details. The researcher generates codes, derives themes, and finally produces meaningful interpretations based on these themes. In the conclusion section, we look at general patterns. We at least show the general patterns, the relationship to literature, the theoretical contributions of our research to the field, and the practical implications that we have made. So, and a high-quality qualitative study has these 6 criteria with them. The first one is rigorous data collection and process and basic assumptions. The second one is the 5 approaches, which is case study, ethnography, phenomenology, narrative slash biographical, or grounded theory, which we just learned. We need to have a clear research problem, so nothing ambiguous. We cannot just do effects of the environment on the person. That is too broad, so it has no meaning. And meticulous procedures, of course. Data should be analyzed across multiple levels of abstraction, moving logically from code to category to theme. Descriptions should be rich enough to make the reader feel as if they were there. Actually, we analyze this, and this to make the reader feel like they are talking directly to the person writing this paper. This is one of the reasons why we do that. We want to make the reader actually more engaged. Of course, it's a boring ass research paper, but we still want people to read it. We don't want them to get bored. The researcher must transparently reflect their own background, what you were doing, what do you, where have you studied? I mean, what is your major? What are you actually working on? And conduct the research in accordance with ethical principles, of course, which is a fundamental criterion outlined by Creswell, I guess. But I doubt you would need to know these. I would focus on these. What was this? Open coding, making broad categorizations, axial coding, cause and effect, and then reaching a core theme. And that's it.